The auditorium at Harvard University was unusually full for a weekday lecture. Students, scholars, visiting academics, and even journalists filled the seats of the prestigious Sanders Theatre. The reason for the buzz? Professor Harold Graham, one of the most decorated theoretical physicists in the world, was about to present what he referred to as the unsolvable equation, a complex problem combining quantum mechanics and nonlinear mathematics that had stumped minds for over a decade. Professor Graham stood at the podium, a tall man in his late 60s, with graying hair, crisp glasses, and the kind of presence that quieted a room. His chalk clicked lightly against the massive green board as he wrote line after line, filling it with elegant but intimidating symbols. "This equation," he declared, gesturing to the board now covered in math most couldn't begin to grasp, "represents a theoretical model for a phenomenon we believe exists, but can't yet define. It has resisted solution for years. In my view," he paused dramatically, "it is, as far as current human reasoning goes, unsolvable." The audience murmured. Some nodded, others looked overwhelmed. Cameras from science news outlets rolled. The stage lights warmed his face as he added, "Of course, if anyone in this room believes otherwise, the floor is open." A long silence followed. Students glanced at each other, hesitant. No one dared challenge the professor. Then from the far back of the auditorium, a single hand went up. It was small, clearly a child's hand. Professor Graham squinted. "Yes, young man," he said, half expecting it to be a joke. The camera crews turned, and the entire auditorium turned with them. A boy, no older than 9, stood up from the last row. He wore a blue hoodie, jeans with a small rip at the knee, and sneakers that lit up when he stepped forward. In his hand was a worn notebook filled with handwritten numbers and doodles. "Sir," he said respectfully, "I think I see something wrong with the setup." Laughter rippled through the crowd. A few students shook their heads. One of them whispered, "Is this kid serious?" Professor Graham tried to be diplomatic. "Young man, this is an advanced topic. Perhaps you'd like to save your thoughts for your math teacher?" "I don't go to school here," the boy said. "My mom works in the building. She's a janitor. I come with her after school sometimes. I read your books while she cleans." More laughter. Someone muttered, "Adorable." But Graham tilted his head slightly. "Well, you're very curious," he said, "but this is highly advanced theoretical physics." "I know," the boy replied, "but I think the problem's being solved backwards." The room fell quieter. Professor Graham raised an eyebrow. "You're saying we're approaching it in reverse?" The boy nodded. "I think so. May I try?" Whispers floated through the room. A few thought the professor would dismiss him. Instead, Graham stepped aside and handed the boy a piece of chalk. The crowd collectively leaned in. The boy approached the board, studied it for a moment, and carefully erased 3 specific symbols. Then he started to rework the equation from the middle section, focusing not on the constants, but on a forgotten variable, one most had dismissed as too unstable to use. He worked methodically, not rushed or showy. His hand was steady, eyes focused. Every now and then he paused, then added a symbol with absolute confidence. No guesswork, just clarity. When he stepped back, the room was silent. Professor Graham slowly walked up to the board and stared at what the boy had written. His eyes scanned the work, and his mouth fell slightly open. A long, tense silence followed. He finally turned around and said in a voice lower than before, "This is mathematically sound." Gasps filled the room, and the boy, standing quietly beside the massive board, looked like he belonged there all along. The atmosphere in the hall shifted from skeptical amusement to stunned disbelief. What had begun as a lecture on the limits of mathematical theory had turned into something far more unexpected. The boy stepped away from the board and looked around nervously. The room was quiet, the kind of silence that settles in only when minds are processing the impossible. Professor Graham, still staring at the work, slowly stepped forward. He rechecked the logic, the substitutions, and the transformation the child had made. He wasn't just improvising. The boy had taken the core structure of the problem and rotated it, treated the variables with a recursive feedback loop that had eluded even the most brilliant postdocs in the world. Graham turned toward the audience. "This isn't just a lucky guess," he said softly. "This is an entirely new perspective, a restructured model. It changes how the question behaves entirely." The murmurs returned, this time filled with awe. Phones were up, people were recording. One of the graduate students stood up and said, "He just did what none of us could, and he's 9. The boy stepped back toward his seat, clutching his notepad. That's when his mother appeared at the side of the hall, wearing her work uniform and holding a set of cleaning supplies. She had heard the commotion and followed the sound. When she saw her son standing at the front of a Harvard lecture hall beside one of the most respected scientists in the world, her face froze. Graham turned toward her. "Ma'am," he said with an almost reverent tone, "is this your son?" She nodded slowly, still not sure what was happening. "You may want to know," he said gently, "your son just solved a problem that's been circulating among global scientific communities for over a decade." Tears welled in her eyes. She walked toward the stage cautiously, unsure whether she should believe what she was hearing. "He taught himself math using old textbooks," she said. "We couldn't afford much. He's always been like this. He sees things." By then, faculty members had begun making calls. Reporters swarmed the stage. One camera crew from a science news outlet quickly asked for an interview. The boy, overwhelmed, clung to his mom's arm. "I didn't mean to get in trouble," he whispered. "You're not in trouble," she said, kneeling beside him. "You just did something incredible." Later that night, headlines were everywhere. Harvard humbled by 9-year-old math genius. Janitor's son solves the impossible. Brilliance knows no background. The university quickly issued a statement calling the child's work an unprecedented moment in academic history. Graham himself held a press conference stating, "Sometimes genius appears in the most unexpected form. This young man saw what none of us could. I hope we all remember this moment the next time we assume brilliance only wears a suit." The boy, whose name was Elijah, soon became a viral sensation. Universities across the country expressed interest in offering mentorships. A tech foundation pledged to fund his education, and his mother was offered a new job at the university, no longer as a janitor, but as a coordinator in the mathematics department. But despite all the attention, Elijah remained calm. When asked by a reporter what he wanted to do next, he shrugged and said, "I just want to learn more. Maybe help my mom rest a little." And in that, he reminded everyone of something more powerful than academic prestige: humility, heart, and the kind of brilliance that defies every expectation. Because sometimes a raised hand in the back of the room isn't a question, it's history being made.